Here we go. Welcome into the show. You're watching Philadelphia Eagles now. My name is Chase Sr. And as always, no matter where you are, how you're tuned in, thank you so much for making today's show a part of your day. Earlier today, did an offensive coordinator update for Philadelphia, taking a look at all the candidates who the Eagles have looked into hiring or have interviewed so far. So be sure to check that video out. And that really serves as an example of what we're going to give you all offseason long. This is your go-to spot for the best Eagles coverage every single day, year-round. But I have you covered every step of the way during this pivotal, critical offseason for Philadelphia. That's why you hit that sub button. But also, in addition to giving you nonstop Eagles coverage right here on YouTube, I'm always talking Eagles on my social media pages, and a lot of my content has gone nuclear of late. You can find me on X, Instagram, TikTok, at Chase_Senior. I'm on Facebook as well. Just search Chase Senior Chat Sports. All right, some breaking news from a little bit earlier today, and some bad news, frankly, for Philadelphia going into 2026. Their defensive backs coach and defensive pass game coordinator Christian Parker is leaving the Eagles for, drum roll, the Dallas Cowboys. Christian Parker is being named as the new defensive coordinator of the Cowboys to take over for Matt Eberflus under head coach Brian Schottenheimer. That Cowboys defense this past year was really, really bad under Eberflus. They couldn't consistently get pressure on the quarterback. When he called blitzes, it burned them. They weren't great on that back end. They made that trade for defensive tackle Quinyon Williams, and they certainly got a little bit better, but their defense was one of the worst units in the NFL in 2025, and it just looked like a unit that was not buttoned up. They were not on their P's and Q's. They were really sloppy. They weren't good in the red zone. They gave up explosive plays. They weren't good in stopping the run. Now, part of that is due to the fact that Jerry Jones has failed that Cowboys organization as far as compiling defensive talent. But in moving off of Matt Eberflus, it was a move that I agreed with for Brian Schottenheimer, because going into year two, it's going to be a big year for Brian Schottenheimer. If the Cowboys are bad once again, especially on defense, he knows that he could be on the hot seat. So he's bringing in a young defensive mind in Christian Parker, who is looked at as a rising star in the coaching industry. And Christian Parker, when I was at the Super Bowl in New Orleans last year at the time, I was asking a bunch of defensive players, who's next up from this coaching staff? Who's looked at as that next coaching star who's on this meteoric rise? Who could become a coordinator or a head coach at some point? Who do you credit with a lot of your development, especially in that secondary? And so many defensive players pointed right at Christian Parker. And, of course, he helped develop Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean into the players who we see today, where Quinyon Mitchell, first-team All-Pro in 2025 in year two. Cooper DeJean, a first-team All-Pro in 2025 in year two. Of course, Howie Roseman did a tremendous job of drafting Quinyon Mitchell in the first round, Cooper DeJean in the second round in the 2024 draft. But player development can be credited to coaches. And Christian Parker helped to develop Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. Also think about this. Quinyon and Coop were dynamic, great starters for the number one overall defense in the NFL that won a Super Bowl, shut down Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid in that Super Bowl. But they started as rookies. And was there ever really a huge learning curve for Quinyon Mitchell? Did he ever go through a really rough stretch during his rookie year? He didn't. One of the reasons why I loved Quinyon when he was playing at Toledo is that the last couple of years, he had more than 40 pass breakups. You pair that with the 4.3 speed, good instincts, football smarts, good character, you have yourselves a really good corner. But remember in week 1 of 2024, Eagles on the road in Brazil to play the Green Packers, how Quinyon Mitchell right away popped? I mean, he's going stride for stride with Christian Watson, who runs 4.3. And then all throughout the year, whether he was on Jamar Chase or CD Lamb, he was great. He was a lockdown corner during his rookie campaign, and then he elevated his game further in year 2. And Quinyon Mitchell has talked so much about how much Christian Parker has meant to him in his development as a young player. Cooper DeJean as well. I mean, he said during locker room cleanout day, like, I owe my success to Christian Parker and how he's helped me young in my career. And that's why DeJean took to Twitter, and Cowboys fans are loving this. After the news broke that Parker was headed to Dallas, this went very swiftly. They got this deal done very quickly. They interviewed Christian Parker a couple of times. They also interviewed Jonathan Gannon, former Eagles defensive coordinator, and they settled on Parker, who's only 34 years old. Some people in that Eagles organization think that he can be a head coach within the next few years. But DeJean tweeted out, man, sad emoji. They got a great one. Wouldn't be the player I am without Coach CP. It's a little risky for Dallas because Christian Parker has never called plays before, but a Vic Fangio disciple who Fangio absolutely loves and is a huge fan of. He was with Vic Fangio in Denver, retained by Sean Payton. Usually coaches and defensive coordinators want to bring in their own staff, but they like Parker so much that they retained him with the Broncos. And then Sean Payton let Christian Parker follow Vic Fangio to the Eagles when Fangio took the Eagles DC job going into 2024. So this is a massive loss for the Eagles coaching staff. And now they're looking for a new offensive coordinator. Now they're looking for a new DBs coach, and they're looking for a new defensive pass game coordinator. Christian Parker was a huge reason why the Eagles defense the last 2 years has been one of the top units in the NFL, and why a lot of these young corners have been able to hit the ground running and play really well in that entire secondary, whether it be safeties, whether it be corners. And Christian Parker coached Jaire Alexander when Jaire was an all-pro and in his prime with the Green Bay Packers. So he helped his development there. He helped the tutelage of Patrick Surtain, who last year won Defensive Player of the Year, and then now has helped to develop 2 young players in Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean and becoming first-team All-Pros their second year in the National Football League. Now, where do the Eagles go from here? A couple names that everybody should keep an eye out for. An external candidate to watch is Dennard Wilson. He was the defensive coordinator for Tennessee, but Robert Saleh is not going to retain him. So he's a coaching free agent now. Wilson was the Eagles DB's coach in 2021 and in 2022. When I asked CJ Gardner-Johnson going into the Super Bowl in Arizona in 2022, he was able to make a seamless transition from slot corner to safety because he didn't really play a lot of safety prior to his Eagles' first stint with New Orleans. He pointed right at Dennard Wilson and said, this guy. So Dennard Wilson is definitely a candidate. Now, I think there may have been a little bit of bad blood between Dennard Wilson and this Eagles coaching staff. I'm not going to say like Nick Sirianni directly, but Dennard Wilson did leave the Eagles after 2022 to go to the Baltimore Ravens to be their DB's coach. And maybe his contract was up or something like that. So there could be something there where a reunion is not possible, but he did some nice things with the Eagles when he was their DB's coach, and Nick Sirianni helped to bring him in, and Jonathan Gannon helped to bring him in 2021. The other candidate is an internal candidate, and that is Joe Casper. He was the Eagles' defensive quality control coach under Jonathan Gannon in 2021 and 2022, went to the Miami Dolphins in 2023, then was brought back by Vic Fangio in 2024 to become the Eagles safeties coach, and he's held that position the last 2 years. That is a coach that the Eagles are very high on. So he could just be an internal option to replace Christian Parker. So a couple names to look out for to replace CP. Again, a big loss for this Eagles coaching staff and a great mentor for some of these young Eagles defensive backs. Some other news in the coaching ranks across the NFL that could impact the Eagles here. Jesse Minter, who was the Chargers defensive coordinator the last 2 years under Jim Harbaugh, is going to the Baltimore Ravens to take their head coaching job in replacing John Harbaugh. Minter was a DC for Baltimore. Prior to that, he was with, or no, was he with the Ravens? Let me double check that. I remember interviewing him in the lead up to the national championship in Houston a couple of years ago. Yeah, I'm not tripping. He was with the Ravens from 2017 to 2020. Defensive assistant, 2017, 2018. Assistant DBs coach, 2019. Defensive backs coach in 2020. Then he went to Vanderbilt as their DC, went to Michigan with Harbaugh for 2022, 2023, was the DC there when Michigan won a national championship, followed Harbaugh to the Chargers, was their DC the last 2 years. That Chargers defense was a top 10 unit this year, and they were really good last year. And owner Steve Bisciotti of the Ravens, their general manager, Ozzie Newsome, still in the mix. I always trust what Baltimore is doing. And I really like Jesse Minter as a head coach candidate. He was actually my favorite DC candidate once Jonathan Gannon left. And I wasn't sure if the Eagles were going to be able to bring in Vic Fangio because he was under contract with the Dolphins at the time. So now he becomes the head coach of Baltimore. This is impactful for the Eagles because now it's not an offensive play caller who's going to serve as head coach with the Ravens who's taken that job. That opens up an offensive coordinator role for Baltimore. So that could take a really top candidate from the Eagles offensive coordinator search, potentially, away from Philadelphia. They go to Baltimore to be the play caller and offensive coordinator for Lamar Jackson. Now, there was some chatter that Lamar Jackson really wanted Cliff Kingsbury as his OC, head coach. Maybe Kingsbury takes the OC job with Baltimore. I think that's a possibility there, and it would be a good opportunity for Kingsbury. And if that makes Lamar happy, you obviously always want to appease him. But what if the Ravens got a Joe Brady, who's interviewing for the Bills head coaching job, who right now is my number one candidate for the Eagles OC job? That would kind of suck. So the hiring of Jesse Minter, the fact that he's a defensive mind going to Baltimore, that could take another top offensive coordinator candidate off the board for Philadelphia here. So just wanted to pass along that news and some thoughts. I didn't even have any notes. I just wanted to turn on the camera, turn on the microphone, chop it up, and talk some birds here. Content to come all throughout the weekend. Content to come every single day here on Eagles Now because this is what we do. It might be the offseason, but the coverage does not stop. Hit that sub button. Keep it locked here, right here on Eagles Now, and thanks for watching.